Okay, it's time for another official ship update video. Another official ship update video to replace the previous one that was made before Railjack Revisited, so that this one will become the new channel trailer. So here we are in the KATHERINE GAZZA dry dock with, of course, the KATHERINE GAZZA. So let's have a look at the components. I am, of course, using a Z-Key Shield Array Mark III. This is actually a fully maxed out Z-Key Shield Array via Veil's transfer, so that is definitely one of the new systems that was officially announced and now introduced with Railjack Revisited, so that is pretty damn good. I'm also using a Vidar Engines Mark III. Now initially I thought that with the changes to Railjack Revisited that the Levan engines would be better, but in a video that I did comparing both Vidar and Levan engines, it turns out that for long distance travel, which is kind of something that I do a lot when I'm not playing something like Gaian Point, Vidar engines are ultimately the better option, so I am using a Vidar Engines Mark III. I'm also using the Vidar Reactor Mark III, which I didn't really need to roll past the 100 avionics cap, but I have actually used Veil's transfer to max out the additional flux capacity. With 100% flux capacity as well, that is useful to some extent, but it's really that 100 avionics cap that is the most useful thing about it. And like all good Railjacks, I'm going to be using some pretty damn powerful weapons. So in terms of my pilot guns, I am still sticking to my trusty Levan Castnox Mark III. The Levan Castnox Mark III with these stats is basically a status machine. The idea is that I can use this weapon with its 24% status chance on cruise ships, especially whenever we reach a high enough level where cruise ships actually need to have their armor stripped in order to get destroyed by a Railjack forward artillery cannon. That's when the Levan Castnox is going to be extremely useful. It's not that great for damage, but that's okay because I'm stripping armor like forever. Now for the side guns, I am specifically using a different kind of gun, which is the Z-Key APOC Mark III, despite the fact that I haven't actually built for a Z-Key APOC Mark III. But on the side guns, my side gunners can enjoy the use of a particularly powerful auto fire cannon. I feel like this particular weapon is really good, and even though the APOCs do also have the same idea where Levan and Vidar APOCs actually don't heat up as quickly, I feel like the amount of time that it takes for a Z-Key APOC to heat up before it overheats is actually perfectly manageable. So I feel like just using the Z-Key APOC Mark III is actually a pretty good idea. And of course, for the munitions, I am using a Tycho Seeker Mark III as always. The Tycho Seeker Mark III I feel like is the most useful of the ordinances. The Galvark is cute, the Milati is a bit iffy, but the Tycho Seeker I feel like is just the way to go. There's really no ifs, ands or buts about this. This particular ordnance is really damn strong. Now the big thing about all Railjack builds is really the avionics crit. Like, we've just gone through the vegetables, now let's get into the meat. So here is the avionics grid for the KATHERINE GAZZA, as well as the statistics for my Railjack. We'll start off with Ion Burn. So Ion Burn, of course, increasing my boost speed by 40%. This is actually stronger than the Ion Burn that I used to use before, which was actually like a sort of nerfed version of Ion Burn back in the time. So the Ion Burn that I'm using now is actually more powerful than the one I used before. We're also going to be using Cruising Speed, which is actually a new avionic from Railjack Revisited. This, of course, increasing speed by 80% when there are no enemies within 3,000 meters. Here's the thing, again, about Cruising Speed. It is meant to not work when there are enemies within 3,000 meters, but I generally don't notice a difference between when Cruising Speed is technically off and when Cruising Speed is technically on. So I feel like Cruising Speed at the moment actually just straight up increases my speed by 80%, so I feel like Cruising Speed is really damn strong. Furthermore, we're also using Conic Nozzle, because why the hell not? This Conic Nozzle is a max Conic Nozzle, so we're getting slightly more, because the old Conic Nozzle when maxed was giving me 25% speed. Now this one is giving me 25.6% speed, so that's pretty damn good. Now we're also using two avionics that are very cheap. Quick Lock and Artillery Cheap Shot. Both of these are 3 drain avionics, and I feel like these are just so much value for such small amount of drain. So with Quick Lock, we're decreasing the ordnance lock-on time by 75%. This is specifically useful against Scold cruise ships. Those are the cruise ships that have that extra shield generator on top of them, because by using a Tycho Seeker on one of those Scold cruise ships, provided you aim, I think, to the top of the Scold cruise ship, although I have noticed this work if you actually hit the front of the Scold cruise ship, the Tycho Seeker, when used with Warhead, typically one-shots the shield generators and blows them all up. That then opens up the shield generator to get blown up by something like the forward artillery, or then get rammed into by the Tenno using the gunner intrinsics. So using Quick Lock is probably a really good idea when it comes to using the Tycho Seeker Mark III. The next one is, like I said, artillery cheap shot. Forward artillery has 50% chance to not consume dome charges. So even in a Veil mission where there are 6 cruise ships and I only have 5 dome charges in reserve, forward artillery typically doesn't actually use up all 5 of those dome charges because of artillery cheap shot. So that is actually something that is really useful. It means I don't have to spend a lot of time going back to the fort and making some more artillery shots, because with artillery cheap shot I don't actually need to do that at all. And like I said, with Warhead, this is of course a maxed Warhead, which is more or less the same power as an original maxed Warhead. So with this particular avionic attached to my ship, my Tycho Seeker Mark III is actually capable of one-shotting those shield generators, which makes it really useful. Now I am actually using Hyperflux on my ship, which gives me a 99% extra flux energy. That's 99%. That brings my flux energy up to 720 from an original 450. So that's basically how that is actually working. But with Hyperflux, this means that I can use a lot of my abilities a lot more, such as using Seeker Volley a lot more, but I will talk a little bit about that later on. Now I am actually using the forward artillery avionic for my ship, and the reason why I want to use forward artillery on my ship is because what this means is that in any mission from about Gaian Point and lower, the forward artillery, no matter what I hit on the cruise ship, will destroy the cruise ship in one foul swoop. So whether I hit the hull or whether I hit the engines, the forward artillery will destroy that cruise ship. In missions that are harder and of a higher level than Gaian Point, that is probably not the case, especially in Roos Warfield. Using the forward artillery will take out a large chunk of a cruise ship's health if you only hit the hull, but you'll still want to be aiming for the engines when you are using the forward artillery cannon. If we eventually go up to level 100 cruise ships again, from example like the Scarlet Spear cruise ships that were like level 100 and something rather, the forward artillery might play a much better role when it comes to attacking the cruise ship engines. But for the time being, the main goal of using forward artillery is just so that pretty much all cruise ships outside of, I think, Roos Warfield and maybe the Rhea cruise ships, they can get one-shotted no matter what you hit. And of course we're going to use Hyperflux because why the hell not? Increased turret damage is always a good idea, and it is going to be the one thing that is going to give my side gunners a bit of an easier time using that Zetki APOC Mark III. I could go whole ham and go for Predator section density, but as you can see, this is actually a full grid with things that I want to use, so I'm not going to be going for those critical damage turret mods. And the reason why I'm not using bulkhead or hull weave, just a side note, is because I have countermeasures, is because I have void cloak, and because when I go up against cruise ships, I'm able to hit cruise ships from 15 kilometers away. So I have no real need to use something like bulkhead, hull weave, and or Fiery Phoenix, because I don't need that tankiness because I'm skillful enough not to get destroyed. Now for the tactical avionics, I've decided to go for Intruder Stasis, Void Cloak, and Battle Forge. So with Intruder Stasis, this is actually useful for a specific Railjack Nightwave act, being the one where you want to take no damage against borders but kill all of them at the same time. Intruder Stasis obviously is a great option when you're not using someone like Limbo. Intruder Stasis is the one that I've chosen to use. Void Cloak remains always as useful as ever, so I will continue to use this particular avionic. I find that this avionic is really good for when I am just by myself taking out multiple cruise ships at once, and those cruise ships happen to not be too far away. So when they're close enough that they can attack me, I can activate Void Cloak and they won't attack me at all. And I'm also choosing to use Battle Forge because the other 8 drain tactical avionics are no longer as useful. Fire Suppression used to be the one that I would use, but with the changes to hazards, I find Fire Suppression to be basically useless, so I'm not even bothering with that particular one anymore. However, with the amount of resources that I can build and the amount of energy that I am just burning through with things like Seeker Volley, Tether, Void Hole, etc., being able to reset the forge in order to build more flux energy or to be able to build more Revelite. If I happen to get a couple of breaches, that is probably going to be the more useful idea as opposed to something like fire suppression, so we're going to use Battleforge. Awesome. Now, in terms of the battle avionics, I actually switched these out a lot more than usual, so I guess that is one good thing that has come out of Railjack Revisited. But in terms of the defensive battle avionics, I still maintain that countermeasures is the most useful of the defensive battle avionics, simply because something like Munitions Vortex is not really all that useful when something like Tether exists, for example. So countermeasures, of course, being the actual defensive battle avionic, is the one that I continue to use. The great thing about this is that it actually starts off with a very low flux energy cost, and then as you use them, it actually doubles the cost. So I actually just use them every so often, and almost no energy is used for countermeasures. So that is a huge buff to this particular avionic. The next one for my offensive battle avionic is Particle Ram, and I actually like all of the offensive battle avionics, including Shadow Burst, but I don't particularly use Shadow Burst a whole lot. These days I either default to Particle Ram because Particle Ram is always useful, or I actually use Tether, which is currently the speedrun meta. But with Particle Ram, this is a pretty damn powerful avionic, and I did actually talk a little bit about this in a dedicated video for Particle Ram, so you might want to check that out. Otherwise, Seeker Volley, it got buffed. It's actually now really useful in Gaian Point, so this is one of my favorite abilities to use, because who doesn't love shooting a bunch of missiles out and watching them actively seek out and destroy enemies really damn well. So that is basically the KATHERINE GAZZA in all its entirety. Speed and utility as always. No survivability, because I actually don't need any survivability because my Railjack is so powerful, it's so fast, it's so strong that nothing can kill me when everything is dead. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you build your ship after Railjack Revisited? Do you go for a much more balanced option of actually involving some survivability avionics in here? I sometimes do that as well, specifically if I have allies. So for example, I would probably replace Warhead with Bulkhead. I will probably replace Hyperstrike with Hull Weave. And then I run around like that, and I probably use something like Fiery Phoenix just for the hell of it. But in my own general gameplay, because I'm skillful enough to hit a cruise ship from 15 kilometers away, I tend to not need that, so that's just how I roll. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Warframe content, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.